open your Bibles to Obadiah. If you're like, where's Obadiah? You can just open your Hopesprings app and it'll pop up magically for you, and you don't have to worry about it. Obadiah chapter, nothing because there is no chapters. We're just going to read verse 10 and 11 and then pray. Obadiah verse 10 says, "Because of violence to your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame, and you'll be cut off forever. On the day that you stood aloof, on the day that strangers carried off his wealth and foreigners entered his gate and cast lots for Jerusalem, you too were like one of them." God, this morning, I ask that you would help words that, for whatever reason you wanted penned so long ago, would make sense today. Ask God that we would see you and love you and appreciate you more after being here for an hour or so than we did before we came. But I also ask God that that love and appreciation and acknowledgement of you would grow even when we leave throughout our week. And I love you, Jesus. Amen. So we are in our mini-series, which is in the midst of our giant series being the entire Bible, one book per week. Some books are vast, and there's no way that we could at all even come close to capturing everything that is inside that book. Some books are tiny, like Obadiah, which has 21 verses. So I thought about just this morning reading each verse and spending like an hour a minute, 30 seconds on each verse, because I was trying to think of how do I make like 21 verses last for 30 minutes. And I'm sure a lot of you are like, you don't have to. But I've also, on the other side, got people that say, like, man, I was going to Hopesprings, but I don't want to go there anymore because I drove all that way and you talked for like 15 minutes, and so I didn't feel like I got my money's worth. I was like, well, I don't know how much you put in the offering, but why not that? But in this book, Obadiah, if you want to read it on your own after I finish talking, you're more than welcome to. Go ahead and open up your app and read it when you get home. Read it. But this book is strange. Like, it's just the story of Jacob and Esau, or Jacob and Edom, or Israel and the Edomites. Doesn't matter. You can plug and place any of those names in there that you want because it's used interchangeably throughout. And what it really is it's the story of mankind. It's like the oldest story of mankind. Like one of the very first stories of mankind was Cain and Abel. And it brings to light, this book, it brings to light all that wickedness and evil that we try to cover up or try to hide or try to push down or try to move to the side. But really, it uncovers it and it brings it all out into the open so that we see, oh, this is why I do what I do. Like right here, he's upset and God's mad and he's saying, listen, you're rejoicing over your brother's fall? And then he says, you know, when you stood there aloof, when you did nothing, when you saw something happening and you just stepped back and you watched it transpire, then you were just like the person pulling down the walls, stealing the gold, and murdering. It's the same. Jacob and Esau had a rivalry. So did Cain and Abel. They had a rivalry. So do most of us. Like we move through life and we have these rivalries all over the place. It's how we grow, it's how we learn, and they're not necessarily bad things. Discipleship that the Bible talks about often is somewhat of a rivalry. Paul says the things you see and do that I do, the things you see in me, do those things. Jesus says the things you've seen me do, greater things than these will you do. There's this whole attitude of sort of a rivalry and a competition, but then it turns bad because we are evil people and we have wickedness in our heart. The obvious and aggressive form of rivalry is Jacob and Esau, Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel, if you don't know the story, they're told to bring these offerings. Abel brings a good offering, Cain does not bring a good offering. God, in fact, says he despises Cain's offering. And so Cain's looking at his brother, and he's like, well, you accepted his, but you don't accept mine. And this frustration sets in, and he wants to be in that place that his brother is. So he takes it to the extreme, and he murders his brother. And there's the creepy part where God says, hey, where's your brother? Am I my brother's keeper? And God said, the voice of your brother's blood is calling out to me from the earth. Jacob and Esau, they have a rivalry. Esau's a hunter. Esau's super hairy too. I don't know why that part's in the Bible, but it is talking about him being super hairy. Jacob's not. Jacob's like, I don't know. What's the opposite of being hairy? I don't want to say hairless, but like smooth. Okay, he was smooth and shiny. And they didn't like each other. One was a mama's boy, one was a father's son. One was a hunter, one was a gardener. Actually, he did housework. They were frustrated constantly with one another. Jacob came out of the womb holding on to his brother's ankle. In his whole life, he was told and believed he would supplant his brother and take his brother's place. Until he finally did. His brother was filled with anger. He said, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to tear you down. I'm going to destroy you. And Jacob had to run away and leave. And from that moment on, throughout history, we have these two rival families that become tribes, that become nations, that become countries. And now our entire world is torn apart because these two countries cannot get along. And we have all the debacle that happens in the Middle East because of two brothers who carried their grudges and couldn't let them go because of a rivalry. And God's speaking to him right here. Because of violence to your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame, and you will be forever cut off because you did nothing. So the first thing we see is that rivalry, the obvious and aggressive aspect of our human life is rivalry. But the obvious and passive is when we stand aloof. Because that's the other thing he got in trouble for here. He said things were happening to your brother and you just turned the other way. You just stood back and were like, he'll get what he gets. Deserves what he deserves. I know we've all read that quote, like I think it was really popular right after 9/11, the Edmund Burke quote where he said, the only thing necessary for evil to rise is for good men to do nothing. But you ever wondered why good men do nothing? I wonder that a lot. Because I think to myself, I would do something, right? If I'm in that place, I'm going to do something. There was this test given, I think the guy's name was Milken or something like that, doesn't matter. He was a scientist. And he ran this experiment right after World War II. And it was this experiment where he would bring all these different people. They had no idea what was happening. He would bring them in, and he would take them to this room, and he would say, okay, there's a guy in this back room back here that we're trying to figure out what threshold of pain people can handle. And so I want you, right here, to keep giving him this electrocuting shock. No matter how much he screams, no matter how much he begs, just keep pushing the button. And people are like, all right, and we're getting paid for this, right? And he's like, yeah, you'll get paid. Okay, cool. So they start out, they push the button, guy doesn't say anything. He says, turn it up. So they turn it up, push the button, guy doesn't say anything. Turn it up, turn it up, turn it up, turn it up. They get around 150, 200 volts, and the guy's like, and you can hear him screaming in the other room. It's all fake. They can hear him screaming in the other room. Turn it up to 300 volts. The guy's in the other room begging. He's like, please stop, just stop. And the guy will be like, I don't want to shock him again. And the instructor says, your job is to continue. Please press the button. Press it again, press it again. They go all the way up to 450 volts is the highest that this thing turns up. How many people do you think did it? What percentage of people? You don't have to answer out loud. 65%. These were professors. These were college-educated people that they were bringing in and they were placing in there and told to keep pushing the button because they were told to push the button. They did it because we have this natural compliance built in that if someone's in an authoritative situation, we just think, well, they know what they're doing, so we're going to go ahead and do it. So thinking, no man, I would stand up. I would do the right thing. I would get in front of it. I would take the bullet. I wouldn't push the button. I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't do all. A lot of times, it's just pie in the sky thinking. And how many times do we look around and we see our friends in a desperate state, and we do nothing about it? Well, what do I know? I can't do anything. I was given this game called Hypotheticals. It's like situations to a ridiculous degree. And so you read them out loud and then you all talk about it. Basically, it brings to light all the wickedness that's inside each one of us, is what this game does. Because I sit there and think often, like I would stand up and I would stand in the place and help someone, but there's something that lurks deep inside of each of us that kind of prevents that. So we're going to play this little hypothetical game here for a second, and it's not going to be fun. It's not. It's actually what it's like when you go through the checkout line at the grocery store, and you're paying for your thing, and then the person asks you, "Hey, would you like to donate $1 to help poor, starving, needy kids?" And you're like, "No, but thank you for making me feel horrible about myself for the rest of the day." That's kind of what this game is like. So you need to picture for me, if you will, an acquaintance. A little more than acquaintance, actually. Somebody that, you know who they are. They may know where you live, or you know where they live, but they're not your best friend. But you know them, okay? And let's say that you were told in some magical way that they were going to be attacked by a bear. They would not die. They're not going to die. But you don't know how bad the bear attack is going to be. They may be mauled to the point of barely being in existence, like just a vegetable the rest of their life, but they're not going to die. Or they may just get scratched up a little bit and go on with their life and have a great story to tell. Okay? You have no idea, no guarantees on what this bear attack is going to be like. But you have the power to stop it. The way you can stop it is by choosing for every day, the rest of your life, it will rain wherever you are. Always. There will never be a moment when you step outside that it isn't pouring down, raining on you. Now, they'll never know whether you had this, they don't know anything. They can never find out that you had this opportunity to stop it. Would you stop that bear attack? You don't have to raise your hands. You can just know inside in your heart of hearts whether you would do it or not. Because there's something about us as human beings that thinks we're the center of the universe. Every time I drive into New York City, I run into this. I'm driving along and I feel like, I know it's not true intellectually, but I feel like every single person in New York City wants to cut me off when I'm driving. Every one of them. And all of these feelings and all of these things that we heap on and all of this selfishness that lurks inside of us comes out to play in these kinds of situations when we stand aloof when something is happening to someone. We see somebody going through depression. We see somebody having a hard time over here. We see somebody who maybe is physically ill, whatever it is, and we just kind of turn away. Not turn the other cheek, but we just kind of turn away and we don't want to make eye contact and we don't want to see and we don't want to look. Because if we look and if we see, we're going to have that little bit of guilt because they'll know we're not helping them. But if there's no way that they would ever know that we weren't helping them, we'd probably always walk right on by. That's what works in our hearts. But it doesn't have to. Because when Christ came, he took out that heart of stone. The wickedness, the selfishness, and he gave us a heart of flesh that can feel, that can experience, that has empathy, that has compassion, that is moved, that he calls to, that hears his name and watches him move and wants to follow in obedience. There's this video we're going to watch And I need to preface it just a little bit with a few things. I think there's mild swearing in it. If that's super offensive to you, don't ever come to a work day at Hopesprings, because you'll get offended then too. There's mild swearing. I think this guy who's talking is giving a commencement speech at a university graduation. I think the university is Yale, and he's a little sarcastic with the students, and he is dripping with sarcasm in some of his comments, but the message that it ends with is very, very powerful. So we're going to watch that, and then I'm going to come back up and finish.
Fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" The point of the fish story is merely that the most obvious, important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about. Stated as an English sentence, of course, this is just a banal platitude. But the fact is that in the day-to-day trenches of adult existence, banal platitudes can have a life or death importance. The plain fact is that you graduating seniors do not yet have any clue what day in, day out really means. There happen to be whole, large parts of adult American life that nobody talks about in commencement speeches. One such part involves boredom, routine, and petty frustration. The parents and older folks here will know all too well what I'm talking about. By way of example, let's say it's an average adult day, and you get up in the morning, go to your challenging white-collar college graduate job, and you work hard for 8 or 10 hours, and at the end of the day you're tired and somewhat stressed, and all you want is to go home and have a good supper and maybe unwind for an hour and then hit the sack early, because of course you have to get up the next day and do it all again. But then you remember there's no food at home. You haven't had time to shop this week because of your challenging job. And so now, after work, you have to get in your car and drive to the supermarket. It's the end of a work day, and the traffic is apt to be very bad. So getting to the store takes way longer than it should. And when you finally get there, the supermarket is very crowded, because of course it's the time of day when all the other people with jobs also try to squeeze in some grocery shopping. But you can't just get in and quickly out. You have to wander all over the huge, overlit store's confusing aisles to find the stuff you want, and you have to maneuver your junky cart through all these other tired, hurried people with carts, etc., cutting stuff out because it's a long ceremony, and eventually you get all your supper supplies, except now it turns out there aren't enough checkout lanes open, even though it's the end of the day rush. So the checkout line is incredibly long, which is stupid and infuriating, but you can't take your frustration out on the frantic lady working the register, who is overworked at a job whose daily tedium and meaninglessness surpasses the imagination of any of us here at a prestigious college. But anyway, you finally get to the checkout line's front, and you pay for your food, and get told to have a nice day in a voice that is the absolute voice of death. And then you have to take your creepy, flimsy plastic bags of groceries in your cart with the one crazy wheel that pulls maddeningly to the left, all the way out through the crowded, bumpy, littery parking lot, and then you have to drive all the way home through slow, heavy, SUV-intensive rush hour traffic, etc. Everyone here has done this, of course, but it hasn't yet been part of you graduates' actual life routine, day after week, after month, after year. But it will be. And many more dreary, annoying, seemingly meaningless routines besides. But that is not the point. The point is that petty, frustrating crap like this is exactly where the work of choosing is going to come in. Because the traffic jams and crowded aisles and long checkout lines give me time to think. And if I don't make a conscious decision about how to think and what to pay attention to, I'm going to be pissed and miserable every time I have to shop. Because my natural default setting is the certainty that situations like this are really all about me. About my hungriness and my fatigue and my desire to just get home. And it's going to seem for all the world like everybody else is just in my way. And who are all these people in my way? And look at how repulsive most of them are, and how stupid and cow-like and dead-eyed and non-human they seem in the checkout line. Or at how annoying and rude it is that people are talking loudly on cell phones in the middle of the line. And look at how deeply, personally unfair this is. If I choose to think this way in the store and on the freeway, fine. Lots of us do. Except thinking this way tends to be so easy and automatic that it doesn't have to be a choice. It is my natural default setting. It's the automatic way that I experience the boring, frustrating, crowded parts of adult life when I'm operating on the automatic, unconscious belief that I am the center of the world and that my immediate needs and feelings are what should determine the world's priorities. The thing is that, of course, there are totally different ways to think about these kinds of situations. In this traffic, all these vehicles stuck and idling in my way, it's not impossible that some of these people in SUVs have been in horrible auto accidents in the past and now find driving so terrifying that their therapist has all but ordered them to get a huge, heavy SUV so they can feel safe enough to drive. Or I can choose to force myself to consider the likelihood that everyone else in the supermarket's checkout line is just as bored and frustrated as I am, and that some of these people probably have much harder, more tedious or painful lives than I do. Again, please don't think I'm giving you moral advice, or that I'm saying you're supposed to think this way, or that anyone expects you to just automatically do it, because it's hard. It takes will and effort, and if you are like me, some days you won't be able to do it, or you just flat out won't want to. But most days, if you're aware enough to give yourself a choice, you can choose to look differently at this fat, dead-eyed, over-made-up lady who just screamed at her kid in the checkout line. Maybe she's not usually like this. Maybe she's been up 3 straight nights holding the hand of her husband who's dying of bone cancer. Or maybe this very lady is the low-wage clerk at the motor vehicles department who just yesterday helped your spouse resolve a horrific, infuriating red tape problem through some small act of bureaucratic kindness. Of course, none of this is likely, but it's also not impossible. It just depends what you want to consider. If you're automatically sure that you know what reality is and who and what is really important, if you want to operate on your default setting, then you, like me, probably won't consider possibilities that aren't annoying and miserable. But if you've really learned how to think, how to pay attention, then you will know you have other options. It will actually be within your power to experience a crowded, hot, slow, consumer hell-type situation as not only meaningful, but sacred, on fire with the same force that lit the stars. Love, fellowship, the mystical oneness of all things deep down. Not that that mystical stuff's necessarily true. The only thing that's capital T true is that you get to decide how you're going to try to see it. This, I submit, is the freedom of real education, of learning how to be well-adjusted. You get to consciously decide what has meaning and what doesn't. That is real freedom. That is being educated and understanding how to think. The alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race, the constant gnawing sense of having had and lost some infinite thing. I know that this stuff probably doesn't sound fun and breezy or grandly inspirational the way a commencement speech is supposed to sound. What it is, as far as I can see, is the capital T truth with a whole lot of rhetorical niceties stripped away. You are, of course, free to think of it whatever you wish. But please don't just dismiss it as some finger-wagging Dr. Laura sermon. None of this stuff is really about morality or religion or dogma or big fancy questions of life after death. The capital T truth is about life before death. It is about the real value of a real education, which has almost nothing to do with knowledge and everything to do with simple awareness. Awareness of what is so real and essential, so hidden in plain sight all around us all the time, that we have to keep reminding ourselves over and over, this is water. This is water.
Testament is when God says, I've put before you a choice, life and death. But choose life. Every single moment of every single day we have that choice. We can walk through life completely in our unconscious default setting, unaware of our surroundings, making all the assumptions that I make and we all make all of the time. And we choose death. Or, and he's right, it's not easy. It takes effort. We could choose life. And then a crowded marketplace becomes alive with the flames of heaven. It moves into the infinite and becomes sacred. And doing something as simple as going in to get our detergent can have a transformative effect on our everyday life. And we're no longer standing there aloof, heaping death onto ourselves, watching people fall apart all around us because we're completely concerned with ourselves. And we're able to see and look with the eyes of Jesus, who said that he had compassion on the multitudes because he saw each one. And I know all of us brought things in here today that we're struggling with, every single person. Maybe this week we can struggle a lot with our baggage and our luggage and our problems. Maybe this week we struggled more than ever before. Outside of ourselves, and don't ignore what is happening to others. It's amazing how small our problems become. Because when we can see others for who they really are, it's just echoing the words of Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa. Mother Teresa. I don't think Mona Lisa ever said anything. I don't know. Maybe I should have just not said anything. And everybody would be like, what did Mona Lisa say? But the words of Mother Teresa where she says, I see the face of Jesus in every dying, distorted leopard face I see. Not leopard the animal, but person. We see him everywhere. And we quit asking God, where are you? Why do you feel so far away? So, I've said this often, but the Bible's worth nothing if it's just information. It has to be about transformation. This gives us a real, practical way to begin transforming. Is having and taking this opportunity to decide and to make the decision that I'm going to care about people and I'm not just going to make the world about me. And I realize that everybody in this world is frustrated and trying to move forward too. So this is the day. Like today is the day when we can change and actually step into a life that recognizes life and isn't just obsessed and heaping to itself death. Let's sing.